No?
So we have a question from our audience, so let me share it for the group. So someone has written in, I'm 59 years old. When should I start working on a plan for my care later in life?
Yesterday.
Yes.
Yeah, the sooner the better. If you wait until you're 75, you may not qualify. Most of the time, it's 75-year-olds or older that will start really seriously considering it. Nobody thinks that they're going to need it when they're younger. You know, if you wait until if you don't qualify, then you're never going to be able to get it when you need it. If you should have done it as early as possible, but I would say really the sweet spot is probably in your 50s.
Yeah.
Hurry up.
and I want to expand on that a little bit. I think this is for all of us. You know, planning is a journey. It's not a destination. Ultimately, the destination is our demise, right? But to your question, planning with all of the professionals here is important because there are aspects to this in terms of wills and powers of attorneys, medical directives. When this event occurs, where do you want your care? If you can't stay at home, where are you going to go? And what's available out there? Because frankly, I do this for a living, and I don't know what's out there. There is so much out there.
Right, which actually ties into.
Do you have policies?
Absolutely.
I don't.
So actually, we have another question which ties in with Paul. Our next question says, my mother is starting to have problems taking care of herself. Should I put her in a facility or keep her at home? So I'm going to turn this question over to our care provider people.
It's a complicated question. I think there are a lot of personal issues that factor into the answer. Independent living offers the right people socialization, which they may not get at home. Independent living often will offer 1 meal a day or perhaps 3 meals a day, but each community is so different. Your mom would need to find a community that felt comfortable to her, that felt somewhat familiar in terms of location, perhaps, in terms of the types of people, the types of activities. There are some communities where you stay in the same apartment and you go from independent living to assisted living. You can add additional assistance. Some people move into an independent living apartment and supplement that with in-home care because that's their home. So whatever care they might get in their own homes, that care then could be added to independent living or to assisted living. Paul talked about assistance with activities of daily living. For example, dressing or eating or walking, getting around. So it really depends on where a person is in terms of how much help they need. And often people will move into a community for the socialization because it can be very isolating if you're living alone. But Wendy, you may want to add.
You're absolutely right. I think it's definitely a personal choice, and there's lots of ways to go with the situation. And I think socialization is a big piece of moving to a facility for many people. There's also the other side where many people really choose to stay in their home. It's just where they've been for 50 years or however long, and they just can't see themselves leaving. And in those cases, sometimes it makes sense to bring in care so that they can remain where they wish to be at that point in time and get some of the services that I described before around assisting with bathing or dressing or taking people on errands or companionship, those types of things. So, and then it can be evaluated during different points in time if they start with care in the home, and if things begin to decline and it seems like it's not working anymore at home, then it could even be looked at that point to go to a different kind of community. So it's sort of a personal evaluation thing, and also long-term care insurance plays into it too. If you have that, or if your parent has that, then oftentimes that will pay. accept that for home care services, long-term care policies. Definitely pay for home care, also assisted livings and different care.
Yeah, and I just want to add something. An exercise that I encourage people to do is to be thinking about what, in this case, your mother's needs are socially, medically, transportation wise, food, whatever it is, and then thinking about it in parallel. If mom stays at home, how do we satisfy her social needs, her medical needs, or, her daily tasks? And if she moves, how do we satisfy those things? And I think by looking at those both in parallel and focusing first on the needs and then figuring out, if she were at home, what services would someone like Wendy recommend? If she goes to a senior community, what kinds of things can they offer as a way for you and mom to figure out, what is feeling more comfortable for people as well. So that's also something that I recommend, as well.
And I've had good luck with respite care. So respite care is where you pick a facility, and usually their vacancy rate is they have enough space so that if a parent, if you want to get rid of your parent for 30 days, just send them there. And because I'm being serious, because you're a caretaker. So you have to work, you have kids, you have a life, you can't sacrifice everything for this parent that refuses to leave the house. So I encourage my clients to take mom to respite care just for 30 days. I'm painting your room. I'll be back to get you. I promise, and you go visit them. And then usually on the 30th day, you go pick them up, and they won't come home with you because they have to defend their bingo title, and they're in the talent show as a raisin next week, and they've got like a lot of stuff going on.
That's fabulous.
And they tend to disarm some of the resistance that they had just by trying it for a month.
Yeah, and the same goes for home care too. I always tell people who are reluctant to have that kind of care come in, if you're not setting yourself up with anything for forever. It's something you can try. We can do it slowly. We can introduce the caregiver first, make sure that they're comfortable with the person. So it's the same thing too. Sometimes it's about just presenting it as a trial, and it works. It really does.
And Wendy, tell me, my recollection is that when you meet a family, that you're also doing some sort of assessment to kind of figure out, how do we make, if safety is an issue, how do we make, concerns about, like, let's get rid of the area rugs or whatever.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about that.
Absolutely. So, right. So my role is I do go out and do an assessment, not only to talk about the needs of the person that they might have that are unmet, but also that I can look around the home to kind of make recommendations on what might change to make it safer in the home. We can talk about other resources as well, because I'm in a place where I can make recommendations to other professionals for different needs that the home care cannot meet, but other people can. So the assessment is definitely part of what we do. Yeah.
Do you bring pets to most places? Some, yeah. So is that like a special thing? Is a majority of them accept pets, or the majority accept pets?
It's close to equal, because it's hard to give up your pet. No one's going to leave their pet.
How
They don't have
valuable is
to.
that?
And the companionship.
Right.
And I think what's consistent with what each of us is saying is planning. If someone at this stage is thinking, mom's starting to show signs, it doesn't hurt to start looking around. It doesn't mean someone is moving, but to make sure that papers are in order, to look into what does my long-term care cover? If I have long-term care, if I don't, is it time to look into it? And what types of services can come into that home? Or just check out, go to lunch, take a tour at one of the communities, just so it's not mysterious, so that you
And you're
know
not
what
doing
is.
it when you're in a crisis, because
exactly.
that's the worst, is when everything comes at 1 second and you have to make these very big decisions when you haven't had time to really research.
And also, one of the other things that families can do is talk about what are the triggers that we move from no, I hear what you say, but I'm not ready to have someone in my home, or, I'm not ready to move. But sometimes identifying what are the tasks that I no longer can do that would say, okay, I'm not happy about this moment, but this is the moment to take the next step. So again, it's that pre-planning rather than the crisis, because we as a family have talked about it.
Yeah.
If you can't do the stairs anymore, is that the moment at which we decide that this is not happening, or that's the moment we bring in the carpenter to do something else? So that's another possibility as well. It looks like we have another question. My brother has young onset Alzheimer's. I want to start taking on the responsibility for his care. What do I have to do to be legally responsible for him? I think this is a Deborah question.
Okay, so here's the thing that I would suggest. If your brother, most likely, my guess is your brother has not been deemed incapacitated, which means that he can sign a healthcare proxy, he can sign a general power of attorney, so you have documentation that you can take to transfer his bank account or talk to his doctors or things like that. So that's super easy. The level of competency for that is pretty low. For most of the clients that I go see, I go in the morning, so they're not sunsetting. Usually they wake up and they're kind of, the brightness of the day helps them be a little brighter in their mind. If that has already gone by and your brother has been, for whatever reason, for health reasons, insurance reasons, been deemed incapacitated, then you can move for guardianship, which is a court action. I would say it's probably 10 to 15 hours of work. And then you become essentially a healthcare proxy appointed by the court. So you're overseeing his person. You can also move for conservatorship, which means you're in charge of your brother's money over the first $5,000. And that's easy to fold into the guardianship. And then sadly, there's other administrative responsibilities, annual filings and things like that. But those are the two places that I would start: voluntarily with healthcare proxy power of attorney, or a pretty simple court proceeding, particularly if you're the only person that your brother has to rely on. And I'm sorry that your brother's so sick.
Okay.
And the other thing is to remember to take care of yourself. In all of this.
Absolutely.
For those of us who have been caregivers, it's easy to put someone else's needs before your own. The Alzheimer's Association, whether dementia is Alzheimer's or Lewy bodies or a different type of dementia, has excellent resources, the ability to talk to other people who are going through similar experiences, and to get support and information. There are also, I believe, what's called memory cafes. Wendy, you might be able to talk about that a little bit more.
Sure. Memory cafes are a growing thing that's happening across the state. And basically what they are get-togethers. They occur typically in one location about once a month, where people can go with their caregiver, whether it's a professional caregiver or family caregiver. There's no question about who has any kind of memory impairment. It's just a welcoming place for people to go for a social get-together for a couple of hours in the community, and either have, participate in that, like an art project or entertainment, food. So there's a website. You can Google memory cafes, and you can see where they're all listed in the state and the dates and times that they're occurring. And you just show up, and they're really great. It's a nice support for not only the person with the memory problems, but also for people who are taking care of that person, because you do get to meet other people in the same situation, and there's no, it's just, there's nothing judgmental about it. It's a really great thing that's going on out there.
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask a question, because I have I have just a couple of clients that I've worked with to find facilities, but it seems like while they're not necessarily promoting niches, there are some like, I want to go where there are a bunch of academics and professors, or where there are a lot of Jewish people, or where there are a lot of musicians. And so usually that would be a great money-making idea, to just come up with like these niche places where you can be with your peers. Is that happening, or is it just more proximate to where you live so that it's convenient?
I haven't heard of anything specific. I know there are so many things popping up around you know, to be there for people who are in retirement age. You know, there's lifelong learning programs that people want to be in classrooms. There's stuff going on out there. There's social groups. I haven't heard of anything specific in terms of each niche and how you find it. But,
Yeah.
yes.
Many people make the comparison to colleges. There are so many great opportunities out there, but they're not great for each person. So there's no substitute for a visit. And some communities have, within their larger community, apartments that are specifically for people, let's say, with memory care, based on our recent question. That may be something to pay attention to. And then there are communities that tend to be more of one religion or another, depending on where they are. They have a reputation for, a lot of academics in Cambridge have ended up here at this particular community. So that's what the research helps with, and going and visiting is very valuable.
And just for someone who's never done the visiting, is this something that I can just show up? Is this something I need to make an appointment for? Do I have to leave work on a weekday? Can I go on the weekends?
Those are good questions. I call in advance just because you don't know someone else's schedule, but you can just show up and take a tour. And sometimes that's better because then you see what you're going to see. Often visiting at mealtime is helpful because you see more people out of their apartments and interacting. And yes, weekends, there's always someone there who will help you with the tour.